Golf R did a remarkable job of balancing performance and a premium disposition. However, there's more to see and more to drive, so let's head out west for the next contender. But first, a little detour. Roads like this remind me why the GR Corolla is going to be so difficult to replace. I'm going to enjoy it on the way to our next cars. I could hoon this till I wither away or the all-wheel drive system overheats, but to spare you roughly 20 minutes, I'll use the magic of video editing to get to the next locations. Ow, why does that tinkle? Ah, where did it go? Ah! Oh. When two doors will do, the opportunities for fun are endless. If you're loaded. On a more realistic budget, if you're chasing speed and sound, it's almost impossible to beat the Ford Mustang for under 50 grand.
That will be undeniably entertaining, but for less money, you could buy the king of smiles, the Miata. Instead of a traditional side-by-side comparison, I want to drive these polar opposites to help those out there, including myself, who are unsure of where their priorities lie.
Let's start with the Roadster. The Miata has become the de facto answer to the cheap sports car question. Why? Because it does exactly what enthusiasts want and not much else. Briefly, to catch the rest of this series and more fun car content, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Thank you. The engine of the Miata is 2/5 the size of what's in the Mustang, and it makes less than 40% of the power. Don't let the engine bog down, and you can still get the Miata to 60 in about 6 seconds. For me, it's quick enough to feel lively, and slow enough for me to not fear an intervention with local law enforcement or a light post. It's really enjoyable to wring this thing out. It'll rev happily to 7,500 RPM, and it almost takes some getting used to with how fast these revs fall and rise. While you can get a decent 6-speed automatic if you absolutely must, a key part to the satisfaction for me is the 6-speed manual transmission. We have short ratios, a short clutch, and short throws with maximum feedback. Every time you shift, it feels like you're touching the soul of the Miata. In fact, I think I need to buy it dinner after driving it like this. There's no auto rev matching, just auto hold and well-placed pedals. And then we get to the handling, where for 2024, Mazda says they've made it feel more defined on center and smoother. The differences are subtle, but they really didn't need to do much because this was already one of the most fun experiences you could get behind the wheel. The steering, while it might not be lightning quick, feels incredibly tight. It reacts naturally to every subtle movement that you make, and the chassis loves to rotate. A lot of that is probably due to it weighing just 2,300 pounds and having a tiny wheelbase. The suspension also helps tell me what the road surface is like. The differential has been tuned so that it locks up a little bit more predictably upon both corner entry and exit. And the result is a rear-wheel drive car that is surprisingly against drifting, unless of course you just clutch kick it, which I will not be doing today. There's a reason why these have the following they do. And it's because no matter your skill level, or for the most part where you live, you can really enjoy one of these and never take it to a track. And it's also a conversation. Yes, this is an electric power steering rack. It has limitations to what it is telling me, but it builds up naturally in weight and does a good job of communicating what the front end is doing. It feels perfectly balanced. The MX-5 might not have the sharp turn-in of a GR86, but it's reluctant to understeer. And you can get some slight oversteer to help rotate the car on corner exit. It's very easy for me to use the throttle and brake to pinpoint exactly where I want the car to go. I feel like I'm getting everything out of it without the stickiest tires in the world. This hooks up really nice. Naturally, the steering weight is light, which feels very appropriate for this kind of vehicle. And if the weather is permitting, in just a few moments, you can drop the top to create an experience that, as I've said before, every car enthusiast should have. Driving this on a track or autocross is also a great deal of fun, but if you do that regularly, definitely make sure you get a limited slip differential, which will come with all the non-base manual transmission models. I'd advise the Brembo BBS Recaro package for moderate track usage too. There's upgraded front brakes. You will also get more snug seats and some cool BBS forged wheels. If you have any track intentions, I would recommend stiffening the suspension, but here, at least in its stock form, in the real world, it works well around corners, and it doesn't abuse you either. Now, if the pavement isn't perfect, it does get a little bit choppy, but it's compliant on a bad road and more forgiving than a lot of sport compacts. I think my bigger concern with buying this and driving it every day is the noise, and it's just something that is unavoidable with a convertible. Even if you go with the hardtop RF, this is a loud vehicle on the highway. At 65 miles per hour, you're revving close to 3,000 RPM. The noise makes music listening difficult. There are helpful headrest speakers, so you can hear the music, but the details are lost at speed. The more insulated top of the Grand Touring might have a small advantage, so I'd consider that if you're wanting to daily one. I think even driving this in the city is fun, but if most of your commutes involve longer ranges, the Mustang will probably have an edge. And the trunk is larger than you would think, but yeah, it has its limitations. Small stowaways only. But it should be fine for a light camping trip and groceries for the week. More importantly, the top can be dropped in a matter of seconds. On the inside, storage is limited, and you have some cup holders that are not to be trusted with anything very big. You'll also have two choices of seats. The standard ones provide sufficient thigh support, and while I've found them to be agreeable, I prefer the bolstering of the Recaros. And at 6'3", I do have enough space to fit, though I did have to adjust my driving position, so now I'm sitting more upright, and I don't think this would be all that comfortable for a road trip. Plus, if you're also fairly tall and you have more glutes or torso than me, you're probably gonna hit the ceiling. Another hurdle for a lot of people is just getting in and out of the thing. It's a little tricky. When it comes to the rest of the cabin, it's pretty refreshing. There's simple controls, durable feeling materials, padding where it matters most, and an infotainment that has some touch functionality, but a dial that makes it a breeze for use and motion, even if it's not the most ergonomically friendly. The cabin of the Miata has aged well, in my opinion. Now, hopping into the Mustang, it appears the goal was to provide a glimpse into the future, or at least an illusion of that. The cabin is centered around the driver display and infotainment. And while on the surface the resolution and brightness are good, it's very aesthetically pleasing and highly configurable, it can get convoluted. And the biggest problem with it is that it also embeds the climate controls. Maybe this is becoming more common, but it is especially dumb here because there are separate windows for the fan speed and HVAC mode, and each takes up the entire screen, temporarily blocking your navigation and adding more steps. And this could also be an ergonomic problem for you as the screen is rather far away. Nonetheless, the design is clean and still pretty distinctly a Mustang. The panel fitment, the quality, it's fine. You have some soft touch materials and contrast stitching, along with leather seating if you go with the premium spec. There's also niceties like ventilated seats. Plus, the cushions themselves are just more comfortable. They provide a little bit of bolstering. And outside of the infotainment, this is hands down an easier vehicle to spend time in than the Miata. The second biggest interior advantage the Mustang holds over the Mazda is that you can fit rear passengers, provided they don't have legs or a head. Okay, in reality, it can work for children, and while you're still down on cup holders, the storage itself and the trunk are vastly superior to the Mazda. It's also a little easier to get in and out of, and this should make road trips more than feasible. But you're buying the Mustang because of the engine. It's a 5-liter double overhead cam love letter to the V8. 480 horsepower, a 7,500 RPM redline, and an exhaust note that'll leave a wet spot on the seat, especially when it's hooked up to the 6-speed manual transmission, which I do not have here today, unfortunately. I did get to drive one briefly at a dealership, but was not allowed to film. The notchy throws were shorter than I anticipated and required a little muscle, but it feels rewarding to row. The clutch is long too, but weighted well. The Dark Horse will swap the Gitrag transmission for the more durable Tremec. It also comes with slightly more aggressive gearing. That'll also bump the power output to 500 ponies for what it's worth. I was impressed with its capability, as I should be for a starting price of $62,000. It has unique track chassis tuning according to Ford and a whole host of upgrades that warrant a separate video. The response from the 10-speed automatic is actually pretty good. It tends to pick the right gear and sticks with it. However, some of the shifts, especially in the manual mode, aren't all that smooth and it can kind of cause it to lurch. The response time from the paddle shifters has also been hit or miss. I think I would really appreciate a well-tuned dual clutch, like what you got with the old Shelby GT500, but it's all right. 0 to 60 on a good day comes up in about 4.1 seconds. The quarter mile, just a hair over 12. That makes it the fastest car in this series. And if you don't need as much pep, Ford will also sell you a 2.3-liter inline-4 with a turbocharger attached. This still makes over 300 horsepower and gets much better gas mileage, reduces the weight. However, in that case, you're stuck with just 2 pedals. And another reason to consider the Mustang is the ride quality. Even here, without any sort of adaptive dampening, this is comfortable. And it also offers adaptive cruise and lane centering with 2 or 3 pedals. The Ford eats up pavement like an amateur skateboarder. It's fairly quiet on the highway too, much more well insulated than the Miata, though if your hearing isn't good anyway, Ford will sell you a convertible too. But Mustangs aren't known to hold their ground on a winding road. So, is that true? Like an AI drawing, the steering on the surface is okay, but dig into any of the details and it becomes more disappointing. The good? Well, I like that it's weighted a little on the light side. It does make it feel kind of quick to react. I can change direction as fast as I want to, given it's not understeering and plowing forward, something that it also tends to do. And you can't really feel much of what it's doing, and then you give it a little bit too much gas on the way out, and the rear end introduces itself as well. The steering has been caked with icy hot. It's completely numb, and there's almost no buildup in weight either. I thought some people were being dramatic when they were complaining about it, but really not in the slightest. I will say that Dark Horse does improve this. The steering does take on a more heft, but it feels more defined, a little bit more natural, and with the stickier tires up front and probably in a different alignment, it feels all around more eager and communicative. It just doesn't inspire very much confidence at all on this kind of road. And then we have the suspension. So yes, you can get the Magna Ride, which will cost you an extra $1,750 on top of the performance package. And I might go for it because here with the standard car, it's just not all that poised, clearly tuned more so for comfort. I don't mean to make it sound like it's constantly this unwieldy beast, but on some tight technical roads like this one, it can kind of feel like that. The brakes, on the other hand, while maybe the pedal could be tuned to be smoother, are pretty reassuring with the Brembo kit. While the Mustang is more practical, in some ways the Miata is more sensible. This is most apparent when it comes to running costs. First, the Mustang is obviously going to get much worse gas mileage. The tires and brakes are going to be more expensive. And the Miata comes with one of the most durable powertrains. Whereas the 5-liter overall is a good engine, but the Gitrag manual transmission has had a spotty past. The MX-5 has also had some transmission problems in its recent history, but to a lesser degree. And like the Ford, it's been mostly a non-issue since 2019. A majority of problems with the Mazda have been related to easily chipping paint and the leather shifter and steering wheel wearing prematurely. It's hard to find any serious common issues with the Mazda, and the halfway new Mustang is too fresh to make strong opinions on. Though it had some first-year quality issues, including a steering recall that actually kept me from reviewing a manual transmission model. Plus, I noticed poor hood fitment with a fair amount of fluttering as I went down the road. The passenger ventilated seat screams. I'm not sure if this is showing up on the camera. And the driver assistance features cut out momentarily with warning messages too, without anything being on the windshield. I definitely trust the Mazda more, but at 2,400 pounds and without an IIHS rating, I certainly trust the Ford more in the event of a collision. Insert your favorite cars and coffee joke here. There's a reason why the Mustang easily outsells the Miata. There's a wider variety of configurations, a bigger trunk, and a more comfortable driving position. The Mustang is just better suited for the American lifestyle of cruising 6 lanes of freedom and maneuvering strip malls. As an old Mustang owner myself, the V8 and the versatility don't compensate for the troubling tech and appliance-like steering. The Dark Horse is a different story, but at that point, it's twice the price of the Miata. Yes, this is definitely an apples to oranges kind of mashup, but sometimes we don't entirely know what we want, we just know we're feeling a little fruity. But driving these polar opposite cars reminds me of what makes an automobile fun and what's important to me. The Miata's double-edged sword is its size. It helps it stand out, and it helps it stand in the way for many people who love them but can't afford a 2-car solution, which in a way happens to be my current position. Every time I drive the Miata, this becomes a car that I want to savor and not just sample. I want to own one. I definitely can't ignore the downsides, but I also can't ignore the smile that it brings to my face basically every time I drive it. For me, I see why so many people like the Mustang. It has style, speed, and sound that you can access every day. I see the current quality control problems, stock handling, technology, and running costs as downsides, but if you want the traditional muscle car formula copy and pasted into 2024, this is the car to buy while you can. If you just enjoy driving, or you want the most straightforward experience possible, and you're willing to compromise some day-to-day versatility, there's no question which car I'd recommend and which I'd personally buy. Thanks for watching, and thank you to the channel members and supporters who helped make this series come to life. I'll catch you in the next one.